City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, play script, director.
Welcome to the American Theater Wing Seminars on Working in the Theater. These are coming to you from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. These seminars have been going on for quite some time, and as I look now, we're about to go in to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the American Theater Wing's Tony Awards. However, the seminars are in its 22nd year, and the American Theater Wing has been producing these as a service, and it's been a remarkable one at that. We have an archive of theater history, and it is geared to give you an insight into what it is to work in the theater. What it is to work in the theater from the view of the performer, the playwright, the director, the set, the scene designer, the agents, and the guilds and unions, those people who work with and for the people. As most of you know, the American Theater Wing is known for its Tony Awards, and we are indeed very proud of the award. And it has been given in honor of a woman named Antoinette Perry, and it's to recognize the achievement of excellence in the theater. But the Wing is busy all year round, not just at Tony time, and our goal is to provide services to the community through the theater. We do this in a hospital program in which we send out live, wonderful entertainment to those who can't come into the theater. We go to hospitals and to aid centers and to nursing homes. We have a program called Introduction to Broadway, which is just that. And we do this in cooperation with the Board of Education and the wonderful generosity of the Broadway producers. They make tickets available to the Wing at a very minimal price. We, in turn, with the Board of Education, make these tickets available to high school students who pay individually for their ticket. Again, a very small price, and the Wing picks up the rest. It's a wonderful opportunity for young people to come to the theater. People who haven't even been out of their own community come to Broadway, and they recognize the magic of live theater. And afterwards, from time to time, we're able to have interviews with the performers, and we see that the stage manager is there as well, so that they have role models for them. Out of that program started another one, and that is Theater in Schools. And it speaks for itself. We bring in performers and playwrights and costume designers to talk with the students, to tell them what it is to work in the theater and how they can go about working in the theater. It's a very interesting program and one for which we are very proud of. And then these seminars, they have been going on, as I've said, for all these years, and they are remarkable in the people that come to share their knowledge and their expertise with each other and with you. Today's program is on the playwright director, and to chair that is George White, who is president of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center and is a wonderful director, both here, Russia, Princeton, China, Yale, what did I say, and China. And Brendan Gill, who is an author, critic in residence at the New Yorker magazine and on the board of directors of the American Theater Wing. They will introduce this wonderful panel of playwrights and directors to you. Thank you for being here.
On my far right is the big-booted and blue-jeaned Jeff Calhoun, who's who directed and choreographed the shy and still hesitant production of Busker Alley. Has also directed the current production of Grease and was the associated choreographer of the Will Rogers Follies. And next to him is John Tillinger, decorously dressed, and who is preparing at this moment to direct the revival of Deathtrap, which will be coming to Broadway later this season, and is currently represented by his direction of the comedy Sylvia off-Broadway. He was nominated for a Tony for Joe Orton's Lute in 1986. And most decorously dressed of all is Mike Ockrent, who was in rehearsal for the opening or reopening of A Christmas Carol, who also directed Crazy for You and Me and My Girl.
I think they're better dressed on my side. Anyway.
Look at that.
Downstage left, since this is a directing playwright seminar, is Lee Roy Reams, who is currently back as an actor in Beauty and the Beast as Lumiere, but is here today as the director of the revival of Hello, Dolly. On his right is Anne Meara, known nationally as half of the comedy team of Stiller and Meara, as an actress on and off Broadway, but now a playwright with a comedy Afterplay at Theater 4. And next to her is Michael Leeds, who is the writer and director of Swinging on a Star, which is at the Music Box Theater currently. He directed the production at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam, Connecticut, and then at the George Street Playhouse before bringing it to Broadway. On my immediate left is Lloyd Richards, who is the former dean of the Yale School of Drama, artistic director of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center's National Playwrights Conference, whatever that is. And his Broadway credits include Fences, and his long association with August Wilson brings him to the current fact that he is currently working and directing around the country a production of August Wilson's new play, Seven Guitars.
Well done. George, pop the first question.
Well, I'd like to start with the playwright, since that's where everything begins in the theater. And when did you first start getting these feelings of having to be a playwright? And you said you wanted to do it and were writing very quickly. What brought you to that? And what's happening?
When I was 64, now that I'm 66, I started very fast. So once those ovaries stop kicking in is the time to start writing, if you haven't yet. First of all, I'm very flattered that to be on this panel and included as a playwright with everyone else. So it's a kick. And
how was your, having been an actress, tell me about your feeling of suddenly being in a different position and the relationship vis-a-vis the director and how all that works.
Well, this is the second play I've written, but the first produced. So I was truly, a virgin in that sense of the process. And I was very happy to have David Saint see my vision of the play and show me even more, as did the actors. Of course, I found out that I was really a little splitzo there, Jekyll and Hyde. When, as a writer, I thought, my God, these actors, why don't they get it together? I had no patience. And David calmed me down. And now that I'm in my own play, I really am a better actor than I ever was, I like to think, because I don't care about acting as much, and I don't have that actor's ego. Of course, the ego's all gone into the writer, you see.
Did you take suggestions readily? Some playwrights do, some playwrights do not.
Well, I don't think I'd take suggestions from just anyone. I think I would take, and did, from the director who didn't have, he said something has to happen here, and I wrote another scene. Mm-hmm. And of course, and I wrote it in a day because there's a couple that come on in the play and there's a big trauma and they leave, and we didn't see other people affected by it, so
it's a really quite intricately plotted thing. I can't imagine putting together a nice plot like that.
I can't either, and I don't know how I did. But I really mean that. Yeah. But I think it's also great, if I may, I must plug the Manhattan Theatre Club to have the that aegis of that institution to be able to give life to what you've written. You scribble some stuff down, and Jim Humans comes in with a set. Mm-hmm. John Gramata comes in with a sound thing subliminal thing, and Don Holder lights. It's wonderful.
And does that mean you're now starting another one? You must be.
Well, I'm in this one. I'd like this one to continue to have a life as long as it's respectably possible. And yes, I really had no desire to be in the play. It was because the wonderful Rue McClanahan had a more lucrative paying job, I believe, and had to leave after the Manhattan Theatre Club. Mm-hmm. So with Afterplay, the producers asked would I go in, and I said sure. And so it's, no, I really want to write. But then I hear, so does Mother Teresa, so who knows?
I thought she wanted to direct.
And to write.
I see.
Oh, the woman is, it's a bottomless pit there. She won't stop.
Lloyd, you have had, obviously, a long relationship with live playwrights as well as dead playwrights. But going back...
You want to know which is best?
Sure. And also about taking suggestions, because I know that your original relationship with Lorraine Hansberry, that she really guided that production of Raisin in the Sun. And, I assume that that was relatively early on in your career, and obviously all of those things on through Athol Fugard and August Wilson. I want to talk about the relationship of the director and the playwright, which is a very delicate one, or can be a very delicate one.
It is a very delicate one, and a very interesting one, and one that varies with the playwright. It's a different marriage each time that you go into it, and they all work differently. But I like them best when they are strong and have a strong point of view and are not susceptible simply to anything I say. A playwright who is willing to just adopt anything I say, I might as well be the playwright. And we are missing one person in the functioning process. So the playwright who, to me, listens to what I have to say and then takes my suggestion, goes away and comes back with something better, that's the playwright I'm looking for, and that's the relationship that I want. I think that my job, or I figure my job, is to discern the intent of the playwright, whether he discerns it or not, whether he understands, even sometimes they don't, their own real goal with the play. But my job is to discern that and try and suggest, cajole, provoke, stimulate, whatever him toward that end, to the realization of his basic intent. That I take as my job. Sometimes it's easier than others, because what you're always limited by is my limitation and his limitation. There's sometimes that he has a good idea, or he may have, or I may have, and it's just not fulfillable by the talents that are involved.
That was so eloquent, and yet you brought up the question also of the marriage with a dead playwright. Now, in the case of dead playwrights, what is your attitude toward their material?
Well, I think that it is for most directors much simpler to discern the intent of a dead playwright than a live one. A live playwright is always like there to say, no, I don't mean that at all, whether he does it or not. A dead playwright, and many people take great liberties with this, you can impose a concept on and say, yes, I get it from that, that's what he meant, that's what he wanted, and then you go do it your way.
But and you can cut.
And, you can cut, with great elan.
Do you think that's one of the most important things that a director can do?
He has to, I think Lloyd said it all, but I think a director has to shape and fulfill the vision of the playwright, and it's easier sometimes when the playwright whose best friend is the waste paper basket is the playwright that I like, because he knows that he has to be pragmatic. I've been very lucky in that I've directed plays by Terence McNally and Arthur Miller and Pete Gurney, and a number of them, so we have a working relationship. But it's sometimes very hard for a playwright to give up some lines or a whole scene which doesn't bring the play forward. Is that the most important thing? I hope not. I mean, it's just something that happens a lot, because
and is important, perhaps not the most, but it
is important. And some playwrights you don't cut at all. Pete Gurney, it's hard to cut his stuff. He's worked it all out, right down to an if and a but. And sometimes you ask him for rewrites. I have many times, but mostly he's got it all worked out. Terence McNally has screeds of stuff that you have to hone down, and then there's a great deal of rewriting during the rehearsal period, and shaping and moving things around. And frankly, also with Arthur Miller, I've only done 2 new Arthur Millers, but one I asked him to add a scene, and I think it helped the play a lot. It helped Tom Aldrich's part. But with Broken Glass, there was a great deal of rearranging and reworking, and it took a long time. The process took a year and a half.
Now, what directors are accused of occasionally, and it's said to be the current besetting sin, is their tendency to do what that imposing a vision on a dead playwright. And in the old days, that was a much less common thing, apparently.
Well,
to express oneself through somebody else's play.
I agree. I think there is the modern theory is that the text is just a springboard. I believe, because I'm old and I belong to a different tradition, is that the text is everything. Without the playwright, we are nothing, and that I'm there to serve the playwright, whether it be Shakespeare or whoever. I mean, I just have done a production of As You Like It at the Long Wharf, and I did move some stuff around. And I have to be honest, it works very well. It's much clearer. I did it for scenic reasons more than anything else, and also because I was forced to double. The Duke Senior and the Duke Frederick are played by the same man, so I had to have some time to have him change costumes. But it certainly works very well, and I was able to cut certain things which are really obscure, and until you get to that, I don't know if you've ever done it, Michael, but that last scene where Touchstone does that long thing about, the long screed that he does, which is a lot of jokes that meant something to the Elizabethans, but doesn't to us. Right. It's incomprehensible. But you have to have it, because that's the moment the Rosalind changes into a lady. And puts on her dress.
Here's a playwright director in one. So now,
right.
How do you feel about this?
Well, it was actually, in some ways, easier working with myself as a playwright, and in some ways harder. Sometimes being in a room and talking to yourself, going, "You will, I won't. You will, I won't." About rewriting, but Actually, the opposite happened with me, where I found that I was more prone to rewrite quicker, because I was also the director, so I would go in and change things a lot sooner than I think I would have if there was another director working with me, or if I was working with another playwright.
You cut down the diplomatic maneuvering, I guess, within yourself. Although, how was the how did you feel about your objectivity? Did you feel that you had enough, you could stand back and really see? Because I would think that would be very, very tough.
Pretty much. I felt that I was pretty objective about it, more from the director's eye, and also working with the actors, and because it was a piece in process, I could write for them, and that made it a lot easier.
So it almost not an improvisation, but I mean you had people there that you could. It was almost, was it a collaboration then? With
in a way, yes. Using them. I mean, it always is with a new piece, but especially with this, and also using Johnny Burke's music and songs as a guidepost, it became a kind of weird collaboration that I hadn't experienced before. Yeah.
Well, we were talking also before the show. Lee Roy, you were with Hello Dolly. You were dealing with talking about, sadly, a lot of people who left the scene. You have not a lot of live people, but you are dealing with, in many ways, an icon in the star. But you also have to, I mean, Thornton Wilder is no longer here, and Michael Stewart is no longer here, and I mean, how did you approach that? That must have been tough, because it certainly is. It's a famous show. Well,
basically, I had worked with Michael Stewart during a revival of Dolly in '78, so I knew Michael very closely, and of course did 42nd Street with Michael, and of course with Gower Champion, and I also did a lot of pre-production work with Gower on 42nd Street, so I knew the man well. So doing a show that I actually love. I love Hello, Dolly, and Carol Channing has been very supportive since Lorelei with my career. So I had a great deal of reverence, but at the same time, too, I had to do what I felt was necessary to make the play fresh, and also to use the actors, because I think that is probably the easiest thing for a director. If you get the right kind of actors, you can just kind of allow them so much of an input, and I think that made it fresher. And also little tiny things that I focused, because I had this wonderful blueprint of Gower's, and I certainly respected it, but also we had some things we wanted to put in. There was a little scene at the end of Dancing where she starts in the hat shop and they go into the street and everybody's dancing around. And I wanted to show, to go back to the original concept of Thornton Wilder's matchmaker, to take it literally, saying matchmaking. So I wanted to have her pair up all of the people during the number, which was not done before. So I involved the principals a little more, and at the end of the play, little Minnie Fay comes and dances around Dolly and exits, does a little pullback, and Carol always said, well, you see, that's the young girl giving me life. As Gower explained, it's the young girl giving me life. And I thought that was all fine. But what I wanted to do was show the pairing, so I left Barnaby on stage so that Barnaby took Minnie Fay and pulled her off. So during the number, you saw all these people being paired up, and suddenly Dolly was alone. And then she goes back to where she is and says, let me go, Ephraim. I thought that was a stronger statement, rather than because there wasn't a little asterisk saying giving life, you know, in the play. So little bitty things like that. And of course, then the hardest thing was dealing with the memory that everyone had of what they saw. And I know that I talked to the set designer, and I said, we must make the staircase bigger than it was. Let's put lights on it. Let's put jewels on it. Let's put brass carpet rods on it. Let's do everything to the staircase. And still, in one of the reviews, they said, the staircase seems to be smaller and narrower than I remember, because you know that you're dealing with the memory. That was difficult, but that's what you do. So little things like that, but I had a great deal of respect and reverence for the original creative people and wanted to present that to the public once again.
But you also did wonderfully charged the whole thing with so much energy. I think what startled and pleased people more than anything else about the show was that it didn't have the least sense of a revival that way. The energy was authentic. It was leaping off the stage, and the audience responded instantly to that. They felt, if anything, more rejuvenated than they could have possibly expected to be. It wasn't a memory trip for them. It became something new. And that night, when I happened by good fortune to be actually seated next to Lee Roy, who was laughing heartily throughout the performance, but the audience was on its feet again and again and again, and it was not an inauthentic expression of their joy. It's a tremendous thing. It's a phenomenon that you've created.
Well, we spent a lot of time talking, because I think there was a lot of sexuality in the play, because it happens in one day, and astrologically you feel, well, the planets were all bumping, and suddenly everybody wants to go out, and you can't say, but you can't say that in the play, but basically that's what they all want to do. I mean, Cornelius wants to kiss a girl, which is as far as you can go, and Barnaby swept along. Minnie Fay, Mrs. Malloy no longer wants to be a widow, and Dolly wants to find someone, and so they're all trying to find her. So a lot of sexuality, and also the women's liberation thing was very important to me to express to Carol, because a woman at the turn of the century only had few choices to make a living, and one of which was to adapt her husband's lifestyle, but she could only go so far. And suddenly she got to the point where she was just tired of working. The only thing left was her femininity, so you sell it to get back into marriage. So a lot of that I discussed with Carol, so I think that it gave Carol a stronger purpose as far as playing that character, that she became more focused on getting it didn't become suddenly a light little Valentine piece. It became stronger, and also So Long Dearie became a number like, you know, you don't want me, Horace, I don't want you. I'm out of here. I can still have a life, and I'm on the road back to join the human race. So I'm going to have a good time, learn and dance and drink and smoke a cigarette. So I wanted it to be a stronger statement. And Carol even took it a step further in her own inimitable way. And so I felt that that was a nice thing, too, that happened with the show.
It'll be a long time before she gets to China at this rate, where you'll be directing.
I wanted to find out, Crazy for You is a kind of a hybrid in that way, because it was an old show and yet it's a new show. How was that evolution? Talk about that, because you had all the music there, you had a basic, I guess, frame.
Yes.
And what did you have to do, and how did you put that all together?
Well, when the producers, Roger Horchow and Elizabeth Williams, flew to London to talk to me about doing Crazy for You, they were influenced by Me and My Girl and the process that we'd gone through with Me and My Girl, because what they felt that Me and My Girl was an old show that nobody really knew but needed a lot of work and new interpolated songs. And they felt the same thing about Girl Crazy, which they wanted to, I suppose, revive, but wanted to revive with the purpose of actually creating a new show. They wanted it to be a new version of it. They felt that the book was weak, and indeed it was. The book was certainly, in Ken Ludwig's, in my view, really unusable, except the basic idea of an Easterner going west was what underpinned that story, and we certainly wanted to use again. We were really encouraged in this by the Gershwin estate, who really opened every door to giving us access to virtually any of the material that was found in the Secaucus warehouse, that great discovery of Gershwin material. So we had access to all the tune books, the tune books that the Gershwins had left. So through Tommy Krasker, who was the archivist of the Gershwins, we sort of had a kind of, as close as ever one can get, as a kind of direct line back to the Gershwins. So we really formed the whole show, Ken and I, as we over a long kind of working period of deciding on a storyline and a plot and scene by scene. And then calling Tommy and saying, well, listen, we're going to start a show, we're going to do the beginning of a show at the end of the first act. Did George and I ever write anything that would be appropriate? And the fax machine about an hour later would spring into life and music would come pouring out. And
so really, as a director, you were really writing it too.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so he provided us with 2 or 3 different possible songs, and out of that we would use Tonight's the Night was the song that we then used for that, and then we would restructure the scene around the material that we had, that we were given. So we really, we were very fortunate, actually, in that, first of all, we had all the help possible from the Gershwins, their enthusiasm for all kinds of reasons, mostly to do with the fact that copyright is running out. And this was a way to actually start all over again to the lifetime of Ken Ludwig plus 50 years. So
yes.
I think there's a lot of insurance on Ken's life at the moment. But, so that it was a very a two-way process. So
and you had a brand new producer, Roger Horchow.
Yeah.
His dream had always been to have a show on Broadway. It's the first time, I think, in history it ever happened that a man had that dream and made it come true, thanks to you.
Well, he when he was 7, George Gershwin came and played the piano in his house. So as a little boy, he kind of came out onto the balcony of his house and looked down and heard this kind of wonderful piano playing, and there was...
He's a pianist himself.
Yes, there was somebody playing this wonderful music, and it turned out to be George Gershwin. I don't think the piano was ever dusted again. And it was a dream of his then to do one show only. He's always said he would only do one show. Roger, this is, not George. And this was the show that he wanted to do. And
he sold his company for an enormous amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. He gave Yale $20 million. And I think it's true that he and the family, they all got together and they voted whether Dad could spend $5 million, was it $5 million? $9 million on the show, and the children evidently voted.
And be prepared to lose the whole of the 9 million.
The 9 million. The children said, go for it.
It's a fairy tale, isn't it?
It is.
We all dream of that happening.
Did you workshop this for a number of months? I mean, did you do a workshop of it at all?
No, not at all. No, actually, I'm a great disbeliever in workshops.
Yes, I am too.
Another topic.
Well, we'll get into that after.
Sit and discuss.
We've got the tallest man on the show.
Yes, that's it. We're moving according, as my old first sergeant says, falling according to tall. So, yes, let's hear about...
I thought I was being for wearing jeans. He's not allowed to talk.
Tell us about, I know that there's been, because of...
Also, I'd like your choreographer, director, right? Explain that.
Well, it's been interesting listening to everyone because, there are no rules, I don't really think, and we all have quite different experiences, and a playwright, is God. And when you're doing a musical, though, you have a third of the talking, and then, you can make up your own numbers, but basically a third talking, a third singing, and a third dancing. So people are valuable at different, depending on whether you're doing a musical or a play or a revival or a new show. It's always hard to direct and choreograph any show, but revival is a whole lot easier than a new show. At least from my experience of Grease and Busker Alley, you really, I don't feel like you directed a show until you do an original show. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're just decorating. You can take a revival and try to recreate it and give it a new palette and rearrange the songs, but until you create something from scratch, for me personally, I didn't feel like I had really directed a show until Busker Alley.
Had you been a dancer? Had you come to this from anything else?
Yeah, I started in the chorus.
Mm-hmm. And then moved on to directing and choreography?
Choreography first, with the Will Rogers Follies was my first show there, kind of really my audition, I think, for the big time. Had the choreography for that show not been successful, I'm sure I wouldn't be here today or even in New York City for that matter. So that really launched a lot of things.
How did you start? You said that you started in the choreography. How did you do that? Did you go to school? Were you a dancer?
I just always danced. I think everybody who's a dancer started when they were 8 or 9, like in chorus line, and the dance around the living room, dance for grandma. That's all of our stories, I think. And then in community theater, and then in high school, and then in college.
Well, how did you go to school for dance? Did you go to a dance
I went to
classes
Northwestern University, basically just liberal arts. And I only went 1 year, and that's when Tommy Tune asked me if I would leave school and tour the country in these boots doing the Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And so I promised my parents that as soon as I finished that job, I'd go back to college, and that's the only way they would agree to let me do it. Well, I haven't been back yet, but I got to do the show.
Well, tell us about a little bit about because I know that because of Tommy Tune being injured and all, the Busker Alley, the Odyssey of Busker Alley, I think is important to just have the seminar to see, because you're starting from scratch. You have just physical problems. I know it's been an odyssey.
It's an amazing. It's been 7 years on this show for me. In 1988, I had the idea I wanted to do Mary Poppins on Broadway with Tommy Tune and Cyndi Lauper, and at that point, I thought if you had a good idea and you said it to somebody, I was very naive. They'd say, "Oh, great, go do it." That was before I even met a lawyer. At that point. So I went to the Sherman Brothers, who did the music and lyrics for Mary Poppins, and I had this wonderful meeting with them. And they explained to me why, for many reasons, really boring to get into, that would never happen. And I didn't have a chance of doing that. But they went to the bookshelf and pulled this script off the bookshelf, and they gave it to me, and they said, "We own this show, and if you'd like to do it, you could do this tomorrow." And I took it home with me, and it was called Blow Us a Kiss. They had written it 22 years earlier for Tommy Steele to star in London. And it never got on. And I took it home, and I fell in love with it. Product is very difficult, as we all know, to find, especially a new show. And I thought it was really a wonderful show. And I didn't know what else to do other than I had this fabulous show in my hand. And Tommy Tune happened to be in Los Angeles about 2 months after I found this script. I called him up at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel where he was staying, and I said, "Could I read you a script and get your opinion on a show?" So I sat by the pool and I read him the entire show, and when it was over, I closed the script, and Tommy said, "Well, that's a show for me." And I said, "Well, I was hoping I wanted that to come out of his mouth." And so with Tommy attached to the project, I was going to say it was easy to get on 7 years later. We're still waiting to open. But obviously when you have Tommy Tune attached to a project as your star, then doors began to open, and at least then you got to interview with producers and try to pitch and sell this show. But it's a long, long process. And I'm still learning. I mean,
why
it was very
the 7
difficult
years?
for me.
What was...
Well, shows are... It's hard to raise $6 and $7 million these
So that was
days.
mostly in the funding of it, to get it on.
Yes, absolutely. But I have to say, every time we thought we were ready artistically and something would fall through, every time we had a problem, it allowed us to make the show better. And I believe in my heart of hearts with Tommy's accident and his foot, somehow in the master plan, this will also work in our favor. And when we do triumph, whenever it is, it will be that much more of a success story for all of us.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Let us
we
pray.
all have been waiting for
Well,
it.
what do you do about casting when a thing lasts so long? How long were you actually in productions when you got there?
Well, I say 7 years. That was not with a cast.
No,
that
I
was really
understand.
developing
So
and
the
raising
last
money.
year?
We workshopped the show, and unlike Michael, I'm a strong believer, and I'm not good enough yet to not workshop. I don't know how people do it. I really don't know how they do it. I mean, you learn so much from it. I mean, Crazy for You is really quite an accomplishment, that you could open a show like that and have it be good so early. That's not been my experience with shows at all.
Well, there are
The music was there for a start.
Well, that's a very that's right.
So that it was much simpler. But also, we did a series of readings, so that even though they weren't workshops, we certainly heard the show, we read the show a number of times, so we weren't going in cold. And from that, we had good indications of.
But I think
what we
that's
had to do.
wonderful, because I read a show and I think, wow, this is ready, and then when it's on its feet, it's different. And then once you get it where it's perfect on its feet, or you believe in your heart it's perfect, then when you add the costumes and the scenery, somehow it all changes again. And the values are all different. At least that's what I
That's also
found.
true, isn't it, from a workshop to getting it on a fully fledged production as well.
Well, which
So
is why Michael Bennett had there will never be something that good, because he eliminated that shock. Because he did a show about people wearing what they wear in a location where they do it, singing about what they really do. So it was,
It's an interesting observation.
Well, Michael, what is your objection to workshops in principle?
In principle, well, I think they can be very dangerous, is really what I think about them. I think there is a temptation to go just as far as a workshop and then never go further, because it's very easy at that point. We spent $125,000 and it's never the full version of the show, and it's very easy then to stop. I think that the danger of it is that it stops a lot of shows that would get on from actually getting on.
People lose heart?
I think they lose heart. I think what you do is they become backers' auditions, effectively, and the backers
Michael,
backers go, wait a minute, this doesn't seem quite right to me. Maybe they should do another workshop, and and then the process just goes on and on and on.
Workshop, no matter,
as if it's the real show.
That's
right.
No matter that it has
Right.
the auspice of
Right.
workshop on it, I found that people still go in and go, well, that's the show.
And what seems to me important is making sure it's in people's imaginations, you
Right,
know. So I think that from a reading which costs next to nothing, on which you can do a series of them. We're working on a new musical, Big, at the moment, that's going to open on Broadway in April, and we've done so far about 6 readings, and each one of those has told us an enormous amount about the construction of the show and the shape of the show, in a way that I feel that one workshop may have told us one thing, but not as much as a series.
Well, no, you're right. The danger of that is, don't show half work to fools.
Yeah.
And so that can be a problem in a workshop, having to fill in, not trusting people's imagination to
Like
see what
watching
you
a rough
know.
cut in a movie.
Yeah.
That's right. Be careful when you show that.
knowing
But
that
don't you think also artistic people, you give them amount of time they do their work? You say we have 3 months to do it, they do it in 3 months. You say we're going to do it in 2 weeks, they do it in 2 weeks. I think you just put a time limit on it and you do it. It's like doing stock. Suddenly you have 10 days, you put the work in and you
like
do
the
it.
world, 7 days,
Yeah.
done.
But if you have a long time, you take a long time. So I think it's...
You don't normally workshop a play, for example.
Start
You
a
don't.
workshop.
We actually first did it at George Street. Then we did it almost reverse. We did it at George Street, then we went up to Goodspeed and did it as a workshop there in their small theater. Minor costumes and very minor set. Then went to their main stage and then came to Broadway. The interesting thing was that, in line with what we were saying, that people who came to the workshop and other producers, investors, the Schuberts, looked at the workshop and said, well, we like it, but it's not a Broadway show. And in my mind, I knew it was a Broadway show, and I knew what could be done with it, but there was no convincing other than going to the main stage, had a little more set, a little more costume, and then they could start to see, and of course, finally coming to Broadway, and, you know, and there it is. But I think it's really dangerous, what I found with workshops, because even though you expect people in the business to know all of their imagination, they still look at it as a finished product.
The other, it's an interesting discussion, because I think that the problem at the moment that we have here in New York is that there is a lack of good new material and a lack of material. There is a small pot of money, which is Jeff's point. Therefore, we've all got to be very conscious of how we spend this money. If, in fact, we spend $150,000 on a workshop, that is correspondingly less money to be spread around on developing other shows. If there's a cheaper way to do it and yet get as much quality as we can, we may end up with a lot more shows in development that stand a chance of getting on.
What's been lost is the out-of-town triad. I mean, the stories of Funny Girl on the Road, or indeed Hello Dolly, which were terrible, and that's where people workshopped and redid the show. Stephen Sondheim, who's a neighbor of mine, said that he feels that he's the last person who has been allowed to learn on Broadway how to put on a show, touring as well. I mean, and the classic story is the one of a funny thing happened to the Way of the Forum, where nobody laughed. I mean, nobody laughed until they stuck that song at the top of the show. And that happened on the road. And that cannot happen in a workshop, because everybody's trying to sell the show, and then the people who put their money into the show say, I don't want a thing changed, that's what I want. And so the creative juices stop.
But see, the problem when you're doing a musical is you can't do that out of town anymore because of the cost. It's so expensive.
But I would think that with everything being so expensive, you've got to budget money for out of town. Well, I think it is so dangerous to open in New York, no matter what happens.
Yes, absolutely.
You get that buzz around that it's in trouble, it's not in trouble, and it puts an added burden on you. And I think with everything being so expensive, you have to add one more to take away the opening night party and put it into an out of town.
Well, the case of Big is quite illustrative of that.
It's almost the opening night party. The actors look forward to it.
No,
sorry,
not at all. No, I completely agree with that, actually. I think it's...
Did you workshop? What was the story of Afterplay?
Oh, well, Michael was in the middle of something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought
you said you're taking Big on the road.
Yes, well, Big is quite... I was just going to say it is illustrative, is that we were going to open in Boston this summer, but the possibility of going out of town and losing a lot of money because there was no guarantee made it prohibitive. So what we then did is we waited till we found Detroit, actually in February, which is very good. Nobody will come and see it. We're very safe.
But that would be good.
But we have 4 weeks there on guarantees.
Be good for Detroit.
It's guarantees, so that we're isolated in snow, hopefully, so we can...
I have a question that I was in, because Brennan, you were sitting on the opening night of Hello Dolly, the actual opening, and the other critics had been there 2 days before. How do you feel about this idea of critics coming during that period, about having the opening night when it was so exciting, and suddenly they're coming 2 and 3 days before, and you have like 4 performances where you're judged? I know we had a dreadful matinee where there were a lot of people who didn't respond, and the critics were there, and we had a disastrous Wednesday night, and the critics were there, and then suddenly Thursday night was wonderful. How do you feel about that? I found it very strange to go through that.
First time I've ever been honored to be a part of a panel. George and I never been asked any questions before. Anyway, in the old days when I was a Broadway critic and I always wanted to go to opening night, I think it's much too hard. It's all part of newspapers and union hours and when you can get your review in and all the rest of it, which is nonsense. But the thrillingness of opening night is an authentic, separate thing, and I would always myself, if it were possible, believe in opening night and not having anything else. And it began to break down many years ago when people were going into matinees and things like that, which I don't think is fair at all.
London still has a London still does.
And I love that. I miss it.
It's a 5, 6, 7 day horse race. I mean, they have, these actors have to climb up on those horses again and ride them for all they're worth, and they are finished.
Well, I'm not a writer, and so I don't know how the critic feels about it, but I assume that there's got to be an excitement lost when a critic had to see a show, run home, figure it out right there, still caught up in his heart and in his mind in the energy of the evening, as opposed to sitting home for a few days thinking about it, looking through the dictionary and encyclopedia. I don't know how you would react to that as a critic, but I would imagine a great deal of spontaneity.
I think it was important in the old days for people to write right at that very moment. We had a famous critic of the Herald Tribune, Percy Hammond, who used to race over to the Tribune offices and place an open coffee can of gin beside his typewriter and then get to work on that. I mean, that's the way to get it done.
Yeah, that's, I mean, they cover...
Makes me want to write.
They cover stories all over the world and have to make up their minds immediately about what has happened, so why can't... I mean, they are journalists after all.
Now, Big is written by whom, and what is it?
Maltby and Shire, Richard Maltby, David Shire, and John Weidman's written the book, and it's based on the Tom Hanks movie.
Did you workshop Big?
No, we've done 5 readings.
You know, it's interesting because I wanted to bring it back to Lloyd a minute, because we're talking about also, and Lloyd, you've done both musicals and plays, and also the difference between when is a reading not a workshop and when is a reading. There's a delicate distinction there. And I would think that you get a great deal out of a reading which could be maybe construed as a workshop, too. Do you want to talk about that?
Has to do also with intent. And what I hear people talking about is what is the intent of what you're doing. If the intent is to raise money, then really what you're doing is a mini show.
Correct.
For the purpose of raising money and affecting people then in that time. Not necessarily for the development of the work itself. So the intent of the persons involved, for me, is a very important part of it. If a reading really is to read the sense of the play and to discover what is in that text, whether what is in that text has value, and where it has value and where it might not have value, but not to view it as a performance, but as a discovery of the work. What is there? And I think that in hearing us talk about it, I think we're talking about various things, different things. And it all has to do with the intent of the people who set it up. You set up a work or a reading for a purpose. What is really even the purpose that you won't admit to yourself why you're doing this? And that can affect the work. Certainly, I know I had a very strange experience the other day. There was a show I was going to do, and I went in to do an audition, audition some actors, and a producer showed up with a coterie of people to sit in on the auditioning of the actors. He didn't understand what an audition really is, that private thing that goes on in the exploration of between the director and an actor relative to a particular role, and how delicate that is or can be. It became, and for those people, it became a question of, well, do I invest money in this or not? So the intent was absolutely off, absolutely wrong, absolutely destructive. And personally, if I were an actor and walked into that, I'd say, who is this? Who is all of this? What is that purpose in being here? Has it got anything to do with why I am here? And it certainly doesn't. So it was invalid experience altogether. And that can happen with a play and the development of a play.
Brian Murray was saying yesterday that he hated the word audition, that he wished there was a better word like meeting or something so that you wouldn't have that.
No, it's an audition, Brendan.
But
That's what it is. They're going to decide whether you're right,
but it's a harsh-sounding word.
And it's very hard.
Yeah.
And actors have learned to, more on the coast it seems, one thing they've learned to be is obedient.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that.
Were you in on the auditions for your actors in Afterplay? Did you go to them?
Yes.
That must have been a certain kind of schizophrenia for you, wasn't it?
I don't care for that at all. I don't want to be the person who says yes. I don't want to be the person who says no. Obviously, eventually along the line, before I croak in this world, I'm going to have to learn to. But I really, you know, I would talk it over with David Saint, our director, later. In answer to your question that we got off on, we did not workshop after play. I had 2 readings. First was set up by my agent, Flora Roberts, and Flora said, at New Dramatist. Flora said, you want to have this reading here at New Dramatist. That's the way Flora talks, folks. Anyway, and she was heavenly and did that. And at that reading was Katie Lowell from Manhattan Theatre Club, and she recommended it to Lynn Meadow, and we had another reading at Manhattan Theatre Club, and they decided to do it. That's it.
But the readings can also go very wrong. Sometimes you can have somebody in a crucial part who is dead wrong for the part, and then everybody at the Manhattan Theatre Club says, oh, this play doesn't work, and so on. And the only reason you've got that particular actor or actress is that they were willing to do it. I mean, I have seen that happen with 2 plays, which then went on to have a life elsewhere. But it was a bad reading. And
I had great actors. I was very lucky, and they were all friends. And you've been around a long
because of the performers.
Well, it was somebody who was miscast. You know, they shouldn't have been cast in that part. Just for, even for
Who
the
does
reading.
the casting of the reading?
It's an audition by the Manhattan Theatre Club.
Yes,
that's
by
right.
the Manhattan
They're going to see.
It's not a
No, I didn't have any workshops.
That's what they do.
You are
there.
being judged whether this is going to fit into our schedule, what our subscribers like it.
Right.
You know.
And
so it hangs on whether you've cast it properly or whether, you know, it's another audition.
But
luckily,
I'm surprised how many theaters do that
or a reading where you're discovering the work.
I didn't think of that, Lloyd, when I was doing it. I just called up old friends, whoever I'd done a favor for, or do me a favor, you know. So.
Because everybody's very frightened these days of making a decision about anything.
Anything.
You know,
I'm not the only one.
Is that, you know, I don't know if this play's any good. You read it.
Yes.
Tell me whether you think it's any good.
And people don't read anymore. They like to hear it.
They like to hear it, and somehow this has a mystical quality. We've lost the habit of reading a play and saying, well, this is good, this works, maybe this structure's not quite right here. And we've lost the courage of our convictions. Producers have, directors have.
Of course, also in the old days, 50 years ago, the people who were going to back plays weren't permitted to see any of it. They just considered themselves lucky to be angels. They were called angels because they were operative without having any knowledge of anything. And Howard Coleman simply wrote checks. He never knew what it was going to be. It was like gambling in a casino. But that was good. They kept them out of the way. And they didn't have a nerve to say anything. Then, of course, it became commonplace for businessmen themselves to become producers, and the fat was in the fire.
Right.
Yeah, well, I just say that same lack of knowledge has just moved up one. Call themselves producers.
It was interesting. Being an actor, most of the time, as Anne was for many years, we basically are actors. When you get into an audition process, just because you're all directors, you get down to the wire, and even though you give a wonderful audition, you come back with a final callback, and you're not so good.
Never.
What happens? It's happened to me, where I've gotten right down to the wire, and it just wasn't quite...
Well, in my youth, what happened to me was I said to my husband, okay, Jerry, we'll do a comedy act, and we won't have to go to these bums.
Because it really gets down to the wire, don't you think?
Have control of my life.
Do you feel that way?
Well, I was an actor for a long time. I do agree. Yes, that you never, callbacks are never. And as a director, you learn that the second audition is not as good as the first. And sometimes, if the second audition is as good, you start to worry. Everything makes you nervous. But I do agree, it's very hard, and it's very, you know, when you start, if you've been an actor, when you start becoming a director, you want to hire everybody because you just love them all, and then
you want them to love you.
And you want them to love you. I'm not so sure about that, but
I am.
And after a while, you learn to be mean and say, no, this was right and this isn't right. And
the reason I brought it because I loved Crazy for You, and I so wanted to do it because Gershwin was my idol, and I auditioned for Michael. I don't know whether you remember.
Very well.
And I wanted it so desperate.
That's what makes this show exciting.
With one leg and one hand behind my back, I wanted that show so desperately, and I worked very hard on the audition just to go further into it. And
make him feel bad.
Oh yes, I put my little act together. And I'm going to do a Gershwin performance, and he's just going to love me, and I've got to have this part. And I came out, and the first thing you said to me, "What are you going to do?" I said, oh, I thought I would surprise you with some Gershwin. And there was just dead silence. It was the gong had gone. And I whipped into this routine that I'd put up, and that was the end. Thank you very much. But it was just that at that moment, it was an interesting thing because I really loved it so much, and so wanted to be a part of it. It was fascinating now that we're face to face.
Was it the English accent?
What is your side of that story?
We all want to talk like you guys. Don't you know that? That's what.
I hasten to add, I'm not English. I just
I know you're
misfortune
born
of
in
being
India,
sent
somewhere
there.
in Turkey. I went to Joey. I had dinner with you.
Well, you're absolutely right. The audition process, I think, is a very difficult process, and it's particularly difficult, I think, in musical theatre because there are 25 people sitting on a table, at a table, all of whom have an opinion, all of whom have a kind of category that...
No, I've never done a musical, so I don't know. I mean, I'm just there by myself as a director with the audience.
And you have a clear view of the talent that you need for the musical, both in singing and dancing, because it is both.
You know what it is? I think that everybody hopes that the next person that you all want that person who's coming on that stage to be it. The audition process is horrific for everybody. The sooner you can cast a show happily, the better, and you get out of it. I think that's it. So everybody who comes in is you expect them and hope that that's it, and you draw a line under that part.
Does it happen that at one side a whole bunch want one person and then a whole bunch want another person, and you settle for the third person who is probably not as good as the first two?
I think that rarely happens.
No?
I think in a musical normally everybody finally...
Has happened with you.
Jeff?
I like the part where you said they were sitting on the table. At the table. Then they wouldn't worry as much.
It's their egos are on the table, I think.
Did you handle the auditions as well?
Yes, and I think, Leroy, also, you know, I don't know about other people, but hopefully the people that are choosing, the directors and the choreographers, aren't judging you just purely by exactly what you're doing at that moment. Hopefully they're seeing something else or have the foresight to realize, well, he choked there, but listen to what he did on those 2 bars, and if he can do it on those 2 bars, he can do it for the whole...
Keep the 2 bars up there. We have to stop just for a short time so that you can stretch, and we can come right back again and continue this, and there'll be some questions both from the audience and from everybody else here. So just don't go away.
Have a drink.
You have a minute to relax, do whatever you like.
This is CUNY TV, Channel 75.
We're continuing the American Theatre Wing seminars on working in the theatre. This seminar, which is coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, is on the playwright director, and it's an absolutely fascinating, interesting, and educational one. And when we left, we were talking about the importance of the workshop, the actors that performed in the workshop, and how important it was to the production itself. So let's try and continue on that to go around and then go on to other things. There's so much to say.
Well, one thing I wanted to get into, because I do think there is, I wanted to beat this a little bit more to death, but seems to be a separation and a very different dynamic going on between the workshop of a musical and the reading of a play, and it's a very, very different dynamic in how you approach, because there's so many, the collaborative nature of musicals and the individual nature of plays. Anne, you want to address that, Anne and Lloyd particularly, but Anne, why don't you...
I was eavesdropping on you guys. I mean, I didn't know what you were talking about. I said, it should almost be 2 different seminars, one for musicals and plays. I mean, because the needs that you guys deal with that are... I am very ignorant of myself, never having been in a musical as an actor for very good reasons, since I don't sing or dance, and then the director and playwright relationship in a non-musical play. I just think we can all learn from. I certainly, as a old new writer, can learn from hearing about this, but I think there's different areas, different agenda for the playwright and director than there is for the book writer, the lyricist, the composer, the director, the choreographer, the whatever.
I'm not sure that there is, actually. I think the relationship...
Well, that's because you're British, don't you understand? I mean, they disagree. They always say, oh, no, no, no. They smile. And you're getting a shiv in your ribs. I know you. The Brits are here.
I think the relationship.
Don't forget, she's Irish.
Yes, well, go ahead, Mike. I was just being vaguely amusing.
I think the relationship between the director and composer lyricist is the same whether it's a director and a playwright for a play or a musical. It's a very close, intimate relationship that is...
I think the intimate relationship exists, but I think it's compounded by other just as valuable titular
There's
heads.
just more of
In
them.
principle, it is,
The principle is the
true,
same.
but in specifics, in how that work is manifest, it is different. It is quite different. When you start working with as a director, with a composer, with a lyricist, with a choreographer, there are so many hats that you're dealing with, that you are, and the dynamic of music and the difference between music and choreography, and what choreography can do for music, and what music can do for choreography, which is very different than what is involved in a play, although the principle is the same. And the interaction between a playwright and a director over the content of a script is a much simpler interaction, although it is certainly the same interaction.
Yeah. I mean, in casting alone, in a play, you cast the best actor, or you hope you have. But with a musical, you get an actor who reads the scene, and it's brilliant. And then he starts to sing, and the composer says to you, well, he can't hit that G, I've got to have that and the poor boy has to go out.
And the G doesn't matter.
The G doesn't matter. I mean, I had the misfortune of writing a book and directing my own musical, and it was very hard. It was very painful, because I felt I was the lowest person on the totem there. And everybody else came first, and yet I tried not to let that happen. And it was a painful process, particularly as we didn't workshop it and we just put it on at a regional theater. But it is hard.
I think you said it so beautifully when you talked about intent, because everybody has different intent in the workshop. As the director-choreographer, my intent was to explore the material. The producer's intent was to raise the money. So I think that, that really says it very well.
How can you take risks, though, if you're worried about presenting a good foot forward?
Well, the danger, as I said before, is showing half work to fools, but what's the alternative? I mean, I wasn't going to worry myself with that. I had to believe that let the producers do their job and produce. I was just going to do my job, and we did take chances and explore and did wacky choreography, and we played with, I was there to explore the material and the music and the staging and the choreography.
We're talking about Buskers. Can we talk further about it? What's going to happen to this show now?
I don't think anyone really knows. Well,
he will heal.
He will heal. See, we did a show. I directed a one-man concert of Tommy's called Tommy Tune Tonight, and he broke his 5th metatarsal on his left foot. And he was dancing, a few months after that, and now he broke his 5th metatarsal on his right foot. So he's very balanced, as Carol. She said, it's the yin and the yang. So the fate of Busker Alley is somewhere in the universe, but I really, in my heart, as I said before, to reiterate, it will all work out when it's meant to work out. Perhaps we weren't to open in the fall.
She means should they hold the marquee? Should they keep the marquee? Because every time I go down the street, I see Busker Alley.
In a word, yes.
Keep the marquee.
Keep the marquee. Keep the theater painted yellow.
That's it.
That's nice, actually. Leroy, you were saying something too at the break about. You are a director, you are an actor. Have you written, and if so, what have you done? And we were talking about how nowadays to survive in the theater, since part of the seminars are about that and are working in the theater. Would you go on about what you were saying about what the needs are for somebody these days?
When I first came to New York, there were lots of productions casting, and if you could walk and talk and do it 8 times a week, basically you got cast in something because there was such a wealth of material. Now there isn't. So now you find that if you want to make money and survive in the industry, which is what I want to do, and I have a Master of Arts degree from a major university, but I studied dance, I studied voice, I studied acting, directing, everything, and I find that now not only do I have to do all of the above to make a living, I also have to be inventive on finding projects to do when I'm not working, because I have a lifestyle that I like very much. And I did a Rodgers and Hammerstein thing for Columbia Artists, which I put together and wrote. I just grabbed all the books that I could get on Rodgers and Hammerstein, wrote the interplay between the numbers, and presented it and sold it just so that I could make a buck. And that's basically what it is. And not that I have great aspirations to do one thing or the other. I just want to work in the industry, so I find that I have to do everything and change the hats constantly. I don't know how good that is, because maybe I'm not getting a big enough identification as a product to sell, because suddenly I'm a box of Bisquick. I can do a lot of things, so I don't know whether that's of advantage to me or not, but I do know that it keeps me working, and that is the most important thing, because
How
I
far
like
have you gone into the media to survive? Are you doing things in media to survive?
No, I haven't.
Just all theater?
No, I mean, I did a little bit of it, but basically always has to go back to television. I mean, to theater. Anything I do on television is usually a song and dance person who's going to be on a musical variety show or something for PBS.
No one should have to apologize for trying to make a buck.
No, and I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying that that's what, if you want to do it, you have to be very, you have to do a lot of different things nowadays. You just can't, you know.
Anna, why did you switch from acting to this? You're still acting, I know, but why?
I'm still acting in Afterplay. And, you know, occasionally I'll go out with Jerry Still and my husband for a particular club date or something, or prior to the play I was doing that. And we still write and do radio commercials for the Amalgamated Bank. And that was one source of income in the past as actors. As actors, I wasn't joking. I mean the feeling of powerlessness you get. I'm sure all of us here have private things, whether we choose to or not, to talk to a therapist about as to why we even choose. Nobody hit us on the head and said, you must be an actor, you must be a director, you must be a playwright. No one would ever force you to do that. Whereas a parent might force you to be a stockbroker or a banker or a teacher or something real. So, you know, an actor, a bum. But I'm saying that we started out of improvisational theater as actors, and then out of that improvisational theater doing sketches. We were always writing, but we never called it writing. And then we had a comedy act, and we had our little 15 seconds of being hot there back in the 70s or whatever. But we were always actors, so we were doing several things. And what I always liked to do at that time was just to act. But I now like really to write and just keep writing until I can't stop.
It's interesting, there's almost always in this seminar a large number of crossover from actor to director mostly. Very seldom actor to playwright. It's mostly actor to director. What about you, Mike? Have you...
Well, I actually started off as a dancer doing Broadway shows, but I was constantly telling everybody else what to do, all the other chorus boys, so I realized I better direct. So, but just getting back to one thing, which I found so interesting when we were talking about the difference between plays and musicals. One of the things I found, mostly as a performer and a little bit as a director, is the difference when you're working with stars. And what I found, for the most part, is musicals are usually based, for the most part, on working with stars. Just as we're talking about the market, you know, to get something done, you need a star. And sometimes in the process, it's not so much what's good for the play or good for the musical, it's what might be good for the star, and that can be in conflict.
Do you want to talk about that at all, Leroy?
Well, everything was there, and you know, Carol had been associated with the product for 30 years, and that in itself was a plus and a minus too. We're just trying to think of it differently, and although, you know, I don't want to get into it, this is all going to be televised, so I'm going to be, you know, and we brought into court or anything, but basically it is different. Carol will never admit to that, but it is different.
Jeff, what were you going to say to this?
No, I think that part of the key in Buskers, and we've had a lot, you know, there was a time when Busker Alley, we've had 12 titles. We've had more titles than Elizabeth Taylor's had husbands. It's ridiculous. But part of the problem with Buskers and finding a way to make it really good was the conflict between having Tommy Toon, who does certain things as well as they can be done, find out how to best match that, what he does, with the story that takes place in Busker Alley. And I think when we first started, they were diametrically opposed. I was directing a show that was not serving a show that had Tommy Tune as its star. And the more we integrated that and made it a Tommy Tune musical, the better it got, the happier the people were, and the more successful we became. But it took a while to find its way, and that was I take full responsibility for starting us off in that wrong direction.
Michael, did you start with Swinging on a Star? I mean, was that your concept, or how did that work? And then
Mary Burke Kramer, who's Johnny Burke's widow, Johnny's big success was in pop music and in Hollywood, but he came to Broadway, and he wrote 3 or 4 Broadway shows, some of which had wonderful scores, and Here's That Rainy Day, etc., from Carnival in Flanders, but he never had a hit, and his goal, his dream, was always to have a Broadway hit. So she's always wanted to do a musical of Johnny's songs, and they saw a show I directed called Hella Mudda Hella Fada, and they contacted me, and that's how that came. And they gave me his tapes. He wrote over like 500, 600 songs, and his career spanned over 5 or 6 decades. And so when I listened to it, I knew I kind of wanted to take the audience through a musical journey through time, and I didn't want to just do And Then He Wrote. So I put the show into 7 little mini vignettes with a story that takes place in each decade, and used Johnny's career and his songs as sort of a guidepost around which the stories take place.
So you really were also, like Michael, you were also the writer in many, many ways.
Absolutely, and I didn't know how much I would be writing until I really got into it, and talking about the process, for example, and how valuable it was going from George Street to Goodspeed to Broadway. There's a segment, which is the Hollywood segment, because Johnny wrote all the songs for the Road to movies. And originally, I did it as sort of a Keystone copy-in version, where instead of going to Road to, Bali, they were now going to Road to Teaneck and Road to, and took it all over. And it didn't quite work. I mean, it was okay, but it didn't quite work. And then I realized that what I needed to do was write my own Road to movie. And the director in me was demanding that, and the writer was procrastinating. But finally, by the 3rd production, I did it, and it worked the best. But that's why the process was so valuable, as Jeff was saying, that while the producers were raising the money and going from place to place, if we had gotten the money originally, I don't know that it would have been as good a product as it ended up being, because I had the luxury of going to regional theaters, which was one of the things, talking about out of town, that I found is so valuable, is co-enhancement deals in the regional theaters like George Street and Goodspeed that provide the place to continue the process.
I want to go back to... I'm sorry, Brendan. I just wanted to go back to something we touched on very lightly at the beginning, and that is working with a playwright, dead or alive, but redoing a show such as you're doing now on Deathtrap, John. You're working with a live playwright.
I'm so surprised that you're even mentioning Deathtrap. I mean, I vaguely heard about that I might be doing it a little while ago, so
well, this will push it along.
We all knew that.
No, I've signed no contract and all the rest of it. I think I am doing it. I haven't even thought about it
this should be
for
fair
one.
warning to them.
Yes. It's not until September -- so
we're the first to know.
You're the first to know. There are a lot of other things between that and now.
Could I do for instance, and how do you work with a revival of a play and the playwright being there at the same time?
Well, I mean,
without it being just a copy of what he did.
I was very lucky, and when I started my career as a director and directing Joe Wharton's plays, and I think if Joe Wharton had been around, I probably would have been. I had met him once, but only very briefly, just to say hello. I think I would have been very intimidated by him. His plays were not a success in New York, and thank God my revivals were. That, I think, is in a way easier than what you had to do, maybe that you have a playwright who remembers his play slightly differently than what it was 25 years earlier, because he has it in the context of that time, which isn't true of now. And you can't rethink Deathtrap. I mean, as I said, I haven't really examined it at all, except my interest, saying that I was interested. I think that if it's a play, I am going to do a revival. I'm not at liberty to talk about it at the moment because it's not signed a deal. But you have to rethink it. You can't just simply have the old set and make it exactly the same because we're living in a different age. I don't go that far as some of the British directors and designers who really break it up completely, and it's a completely revisionist vision of a play, of an old classic. That doesn't work for me. I still am interested in the text.
Didn't you do a revival with Arthur Miller?
Yes, I what does that mean?
God. That's God, yeah.
That's God. Hello, God.
I'd work with that man.
Yes, I did. I worked with, I did 2 revivals of Arthur Miller's plays, After the Fall and The Price, and they were both successful up to a point. In fact, they were really quite successful. But one thing I would say about Arthur is he's the most pragmatic man. And when I did After the Fall, I suggested that the part of the brother did not work. And he said, well, it doesn't work, cut it. I wish other playwrights had that attitude. He's very pragmatic in that way. And with The Price, we cut a few lines here and there. I think if I don't have an affinity with the playwright, I tend not to direct the play. I mean, I have a meeting and
Wouldn't you'd agree with that too, Lloyd? I mean, that for a long term, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That if really it's a live playwright,
it's a live,
and you don't make it together as human beings. Respect. If respect doesn't exist, and respect has to exist to the point that a playwright will listen to you and really take what you have to say to heart. It doesn't mean that he has to do what I say, but it does mean that he has to consider what I say, and I have to consider what he says. And if that respect exists, something is possible. If not, forget it.
Respect breeds trust.
Yes.
I know of
directors
who turn up to the playwright with copious notes and hundreds of questions, and I say, well, if you've got to ask that many questions, you probably don't understand the play. I mean, obviously, you have some questions, and and as you said earlier, and you said it so succinctly, sometimes playwrights don't know what they've written, and you have to explain it to them.
Try.
I'll try. Yeah. I could use a story of Arthur Miller's, of him doing Incident in Vichy, and he came up on stage to Guinness and Tony Quayle and said to them, you know, this play is about such and such and such and such. And Guinness looked around at him and said, no, it's not. Chutzpah. Only the British did. Only the British.
I'll tell an August Wilson story that he tells. I'll tell it because he isn't here to tell it. One of the plays that I did with him, he gave me the play, and I gave it back to him, and I said, there's one scene too many in this play. And I gave him the play, and that's all I said. And he tells a story that I never said which scene. And he went and he cut a scene, and he brought the play back, and I still never told him which scene I thought should be cut. And I can't now, because the story is that old and that valuable, I can never say which scene I thought should have been cut.
It was obviously not the right scene. It was
oh, obviously it was the right scene.
Oh.
Could we?
Or the scene, if I had another scene in mind, I was wrong. What he cut was right.
We have some questions here, and could we now go to them?
Hi, my name is Lauren Pollock. I'm a choreographer and a student. And I have a question for Mr. Ockrent, actually, on Big, and how you took that movie that was so popular and brought it to the stage as a musical, and how you directed it, and where the actors, how they stand and how they feel on taking a musical that was once a very popular movie and now becoming those actors.
Well, I have to correct your tense, because we haven't actually started it yet. But we don't go into rehearsals till December the 11th. But it's an interesting phenomenon, isn't it? Maybe we haven't addressed this, which is why suddenly nearly all the musicals are started from movies.
Victor Victoria.
Victor Victoria, Big, Sunset Boulevard. It's suddenly become the movie adaptations.
They're safer. Oh, don't you
it's
think?
because we know them, but what it does is interesting, is that once you start, and it's an interesting question, because if you, well, yours as well, of course, was Busker Alley started life as as
yes,
a movie.
but that's right, absolutely.
You know, and what you find is that when you start to look at the structure of a movie, which is normally a 3-act structure, and then you start trying to make it into a 2-act structure, you get into terrible problems. So that one of the process that's taken so long, it's actually 3.5 years of writing, 4 years of writing that's been going on by Maltby and Shire and John, has been nearly all about structure. It's virtually, well, it's not true to say that nothing has been about the detail.
My name is Melanie White. I'm a director. My question is for Mr. Richards, Mr. Tillinger, Mr. Calhoun. Each of you has worked over the course of time with the same playwright or other artists. I'm wondering what initially in a relationship compels you to pursue it, and as a relationship has developed over the years, whether that changes the way that you approach a rehearsal process with that artist.
Let's start with the last part. Well, it changes. It doesn't change substantially or basically, but what does change is the way you behave, because hopefully each of you grows a little bit with each production that you do. You learn something. And I always consider that by the time I complete a play, I should have gone past that play in my own growth. And if I went back and did it again, I might do it quite differently. And so there is a change, an alteration in the relationship. And if just to talk about my work with August Wilson, which has gone on for 12 years now, August knew very little about theater. He's a poet. So when he came and started writing his initial plays, if you go back and look at the old scripts, or I do, there's no direction in it. There's no, not always a sense of place and time, and a character might stay in the scene and not speak for pages and pages and be forgotten and has to come back. And those are things that that over the years the playwright has learned to do. So you don't find those things in the later scripts. So the working relationship alters in those respects in terms of the knowledge. And we talk very little because we seem to understand what one another is going to say before we say it. So you say the things that are essential and not the unessential things. Working with a playwright, it's like a marriage. You know, if any or most of you are married or have a close relationship, you know there are things that are, it is not necessary to say. Somebody comes in, says hello, and you say, what's wrong? Because you know that other human being, and they say so much in just saying the simplest thing. Well, that's what begins to happen when you work with and deeply with another person over a period of time. It's the absence of language, unnecessary language, that can destroy a relationship.
I would agree with all of that. He said it beautifully. I've never pursued a playwright. They've come to me, and it is, for me, rehearsals are a period of discovery. I don't have a set goal that I'm trying to go to, and it is. I think if we have to start talking a lot, I know where I'm in trouble, that I'm not in tune with the author, and I've been very lucky in the 3 or 4 that I've worked with extensively that we really understand each other.
Well, mine has been a bit different. I'm assuming you're talking about my association with Tommy Toon, and that began as a teacher-student. I was in the chorus, he was a star in Summerstock, and so as the years went on and I just started to learn and learn and learn from Tommy is when this partnership, well, as it became a partnership, but that's exactly what happens. Language ceases and you just, or when you do talk, you finish each other's sentences.
Right.
And that's kind of how we work. We have very similar interests. The same kind of shows make us happy. And so I think that's why, if we are successful when we work together, that's why we like the same thing.
What a wonderful, wonderful wealth of talent has been shown on this seminar today, and how extraordinary you all are in sharing this talent with us. I don't know when I've enjoyed anything myself so much and wish it could go on and on and on. But unfortunately it has to stop. You all have to go back to work in the theater. And I will close this by saying I'm Isabelle Stevenson. I'm president of the American Theatre Wing, and I am indeed very proud of the organization that can bring the kind of people that we have here today to discuss their background and their futures with you. This is coming to you from the Graduate Center, the City University of New York, and it is the American Theatre Wing and just one more of its year-round programs. Thank you very much, dear panelists, for being here, and thank you for staying with us.
Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. I don't think I'll be here. Mark. Great. Well, like I said, next for the spring one, we're going to yeah, I'm going to really